My name is Margaret Thompson, and for 69 years I thought I understood what family meant. I thought love was measured in the meals you cooked, the floors you scrubbed, and the sacrifices you made without asking for anything in return. 3 years ago, I sold the house I'd lived in for 32 years. The house where I raised my son David, where I planted roses that bloomed every spring, where every corner held a memory. I sold it all because David asked me to. "Mom, Ashley and I found this amazing house," he'd said, his eyes bright with excitement. "It's perfect for all of us, you, me, Ashley, and when we have kids. We could be a real 3-generation family." The house cost $400,000. They had $60,000 saved. I had $340,000 from selling my home. "It makes sense, Mom," David explained. "You help with the down payment and we'll all live together. You'll never have to worry about being alone." I should have asked more questions. I should have insisted my name go on the deed. But when your only child looks at you with such hope, when he talks about keeping the family together, you don't think about paperwork. You think about Sunday dinners and bedtime stories for future grandchildren. You think about belonging somewhere, being needed. So I wrote the check. $340,000. My entire life savings, my security, my independence, transferred into David and Ashley's account for our house. The mortgage and deed had only their names. "It's easier this way for tax purposes," Ashley had explained, shuffling through papers I barely glanced at. "Don't worry, Margaret, your family. This is your home too." I believed her. I believed in us. For 3 years I made that house a home. Every morning at 5 a.m. I was up before everyone else, starting the coffee, preparing breakfast. David liked his eggs over easy with wheat toast. Ashley preferred yogurt with berries and granola. When little Emma came along 2 years ago, my beautiful granddaughter with David's stubborn chin and Ashley's bright blue eyes, I learned to make Mickey Mouse pancakes and cut sandwiches into perfect triangles. I did the grocery shopping every Tuesday, carefully comparing prices and clipping coupons. I cooked dinner every night, real meals with vegetables and proper seasoning, not the takeout they'd lived on before I moved in. I cleaned bathrooms on Wednesdays, vacuumed on Thursdays, did laundry on weekends. When Emma got sick, I was the one sitting up with her through the night, taking her temperature every 2 hours while David and Ashley slept. I painted Emma's nursery a soft yellow with dancing butterflies along the walls. I organized the garage, set up a proper recycling system, and planted a garden that produced tomatoes, herbs, and the most beautiful marigolds. I fixed the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, programmed the thermostat to save money on heating bills, and learned how to reset the Wi-Fi router when it acted up. In the evenings, I'd sit in my armchair, the one piece of furniture I'd insisted on bringing from my old house, and watch Emma play with her blocks. Sometimes she'd climb into my lap and ask me to tell her stories about when Daddy was little. Those were the moments that made everything worth it. The cooking, the cleaning, the way Ashley would leave her coffee mug on the counter right next to the dishwasher, the way David would drop his socks beside the hamper instead of in it. I told myself I was building something, a legacy. A family home where Emma would grow up surrounded by love, where holidays would be celebrated and memories would be made. I pictured her wedding day, walking down a staircase in a white dress while her grandmother watched proudly from the living room I'd helped buy. But somewhere along the way, something changed. It was subtle at first. The way Ashley would sigh when I'd suggest a different brand of cereal at the store, or how she'd reorganize the pantry after I'd already organized it perfectly well. She started leaving notes on the refrigerator. "Margaret, please don't use so much fabric softener," or "remember to rinse dishes before putting them in the dishwasher." Notes, in my own home. For the home I'd paid for. When her friends came over, Ashley would introduce me as David's mom who lives with us. Not "this is Margaret, David's mother," or "this is Emma's grandmother." Just David's mom who lives with us. As if I were a temporary arrangement, a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. I'd smile and offer them coffee, pretending I didn't notice how she'd quickly steer them away from me and into the living room. David started working longer hours, coming home after Emma's bedtime and dinner was finished. "Sorry, Mom," he'd say, grabbing a plate from the microwave. "Big project at work." He'd eat standing up at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone, while I cleaned up around him. Sometimes I'd try to tell him about Emma's day, how she'd learned to count to 20 or had drawn a picture of our family, but he'd nod absently and disappear into the den to watch TV with Ashley. I began to feel invisible in my own home, the home I'd bought, the home I'd made beautiful with my time, my energy, my money. I was the first one up and the last one to bed, but somehow I'd become the outsider. When they talked about vacation plans or discussed changing Emma's preschool, they'd have these conversations in whispers, behind closed doors. When I'd ask about their decisions, Ashley would smile tightly and say, "Oh, we'll figure it out." 3 months ago, Ashley's parents announced they were coming for dinner. Robert and Linda Martinez had never been particularly warm to me, but I wanted to make a good impression. I spent 3 days planning the perfect menu: herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables, homemade dinner rolls, and a chocolate cake made from scratch. I polished the good silver, ironed the cloth napkins, and arranged fresh flowers from the garden as a centerpiece. That Friday afternoon, I was in the kitchen for 3 hours, timing everything perfectly so the rolls would be warm and the salmon flaky when they arrived. I'd even made Emma a special kid-friendly meal of chicken nuggets and mac and cheese, shaped into fun little hearts. The house smelled incredible, like garlic and rosemary and the vanilla candles I'd lit in the dining room. When the doorbell rang, I was putting the finishing touches on the table, making sure each place setting was perfect. I could hear Ashley greeting her parents in the foyer, their voices bright and cheerful. Come in. Let me show you around." I smoothed my apron and checked my reflection in the hallway mirror, wanting to look presentable for our guests. As they entered the dining room, Ashley gestured around proudly. "This is our dining room. We just had it repainted last month." Our dining room, the room I'd suggested painting, the color I'd chosen, the paint I'd helped David apply on 2 hot weekends in July. "And this is David's mom, Margaret," she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone I'd grown to recognize. "She helps around the house." Helps around the house, not she's David's mother or she's Emma's grandmother or she's family. Helps around the house, like I was hired help, like I was staff. I managed to smile and shook hands with Robert and Linda, but something cold settled in my stomach. We sat down to dinner, and I served course after course that I'd spent days preparing. Robert complimented the salmon. Linda raved about the rolls. Ashley smiled and accepted their praise as if she'd spent any time at all in the kitchen that week, as if she'd done anything more than text me a list of her parents' dietary restrictions. I was in the kitchen, plating the dessert, individual chocolate lava cakes that I'd timed perfectly so they'd still be warm, when I heard Ashley talking to her parents in the dining room. Her voice carried clearly through the serving window. "Oh, you know how mothers-in-law can be," she was saying with a laugh. "Margaret's actually pretty helpful, though. She cooks and cleans, watches Emma when we go out. It's like having live-in help, but free." Her parents laughed. Free help. That's what I was to them. Free help who'd paid for their house. I stood there holding 3 perfect chocolate cakes, my hands shaking slightly. Live-in help. Free help. In the house I'd bought. Serving food I'd prepared. Taking care of the granddaughter I loved more than my own life. I took a deep breath, composed myself, and walked into the dining room with dessert. As I placed the cake in front of Linda, she looked up at me with a bright smile. "Margaret, this looks absolutely delicious. You're so talented in the kitchen." Before I could respond, Ashley jumped in with that same light, dismissive tone. "Thanks, but you don't need to wait on us like the maid," she said, waving her hand at me. "Just sit down and enjoy dinner with us." The words hit me like a physical blow. Like the maid, in front of her parents, in the house I'd bought, after the meal I'd spent 3 days preparing. I stood there holding the empty dessert tray, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. Robert Martinez chuckled and said to his daughter, "You're so lucky to have live-in help. "Do you know how much we pay our cleaning lady?" I looked at David, waiting for him to say something. Anything. To defend me, to correct the narrative, to remind everyone that I wasn't the help. I was his mother, Emma's grandmother, the woman who'd made this dinner possible in more ways than they could imagine. But David just took a bite of his cake and said, "Mom makes the best desserts." That was it. That was all the defense I got. A comment about my baking skills while his wife called me the maid in front of her parents. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, the empty tray in my hands, watching my son enjoy the cake I'd made in the house I'd bought, while his wife's parents laughed about how lucky they were to have free help. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice sounding strange and far away. "I need to check on something in the kitchen." I walked out of that dining room on unsteady legs, set the tray on the counter, and gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. 69 years old, and I was just now learning what I really meant to my family. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not even a person, really. Just free help. The maid. In my own home. That night, after Robert and Linda left with promises to come back soon and Ashley fell asleep satisfied with how well dinner had gone, I sat in my armchair and stared at the walls of the house I'd helped buy, the walls I'd helped paint, the home I'd created with my own 2 hands and my life savings. I thought about the roses I'd left behind in my old garden. I thought about the independence I'd given up, the security I'd traded for the promise of family togetherness. I thought about Emma, sleeping peacefully in the nursery I'd painted, and how she was the only pure joy in this house anymore. And for the first time in 3 years, I started planning my escape. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Ashley's voice saying, "Like the maid," and her parents' laughter echoing in my head. At 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made myself a cup of tea, sitting at the kitchen table in the dark. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. My house, except it wasn't, was it? That's when I remembered the box in my closet, the one I'd packed hastily when I sold my old home, filled with important documents I'd meant to organize but never got around to. Insurance papers, old tax returns, and somewhere in there, the paperwork from when I'd transferred my money for this house purchase. I crept upstairs as quietly as I could and pulled the box from the top shelf of my closet. Back in the kitchen, I spread the papers across the table under the dim light above the sink. Bank statements showing the wire transfer of $340,000, the real estate listing with my handwritten notes in the margins, and there, at the bottom of the pile, a legal document I'd completely forgotten about. It was a promissory note my lawyer had insisted I have David and Ashley sign when I'd contributed the money. I'd protested at the time, saying I didn't need legal protection from my own family, but he'd been firm. "Margaret," he'd said, "I've seen too many families torn apart by money. Protect yourself." The note clearly stated that my contribution was a loan, not a gift, and could be called in at any time if I wasn't granted proper ownership status or if the living situation became untenable. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. Untenable. Being called the maid in my own home by the woman whose mortgage I was essentially paying definitely qualified as untenable. I thought about calling my lawyer right then, but it was 3:30 in the morning. Instead, I sat there with those papers, feeling something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Power. The next morning, I waited until David and Ashley left for work and Emma went to preschool. Then I called my lawyer's office. Michael Harrison had handled my legal affairs for 15 years, and he didn't sound surprised to hear from me. "Margaret, I wondered when you might call," he said after I explained my situation. "I've had several clients in similar circumstances lately, adult children who take advantage of their parents' generosity. Do you still have the promissory note?" "I'm looking at it right now." "Good. And you're not on the deed or mortgage at all?" "No. They said it was easier for tax purposes." Michael was quiet for a moment. "Margaret, with that promissory note, You have several options. You can demand immediate repayment of the full amount, or you can give them notice that you're calling in the loan within a specific time frame. Given current market conditions and their likely financial situation, immediate repayment would probably force them to sell the house. The weight of those words settled over me. I could force them to sell. I could upend their comfortable life just as easily as they'd dismissed mine. But as tempting as that felt in my anger, it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want revenge. I wanted dignity. I wanted respect. I wanted to matter. What if I just want to leave? I asked. Then you give notice that you're calling in the loan, remove yourself from the situation, and let them figure out how to refinance or find another way to pay you back. Margaret, you have every legal right to do this. The question is, what do you want? I looked around the kitchen where I'd made thousands of meals, where I'd fed Emma breakfast every morning for 2 years, where Ashley had called me the maid just 12 hours ago. What did I want? I wanted to matter. I wanted to be treated like family instead of hired help. But most of all, I wanted to stop pretending that being needed was the same thing as being valued. I want my life back, I said. Then let's get it back for you. Yeah, Michael explained my options in detail. I could give them 30 days' notice that I was calling in the loan, which would give them time to figure out refinancing. Given their income and the current balance on the mortgage, it would be tight, but not impossible if they were willing to make sacrifices. More likely, they'd need a co-signer or additional income to qualify for a new loan without my contribution. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house and felt something I hadn't experienced in years: clarity. For 3 years, I'd been so focused on being useful, on proving my worth through service, that I'd forgotten I had worth just by existing. I was Margaret Thompson. I'd raised a good son, had a successful career as a nurse for 35 years, owned my own home, and built a life I was proud of. I didn't need to earn my place in my family through unpaid labor. That afternoon, I drove to 3 different apartment complexes. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a clean, safe place that was mine. The 3rd place I looked at was perfect. A 2-bedroom apartment in a complex for seniors, with a small balcony overlooking a garden. The rent was reasonable and they had immediate availability. I put down a deposit and signed a 6-month lease. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in months. I had a plan. I had options. I had somewhere to go that was entirely mine, where no one could make me feel like hired help, where I could drink my morning coffee without worrying about whose dishes needed washing. Over the next 2 weeks, I quietly prepared. I opened a new bank account at a different branch. I researched moving companies and got quotes for packing services. I went through my belongings and decided what to take, what to donate, and what to leave behind. Most of the furniture would stay. After all, I'd bought it for this house. But my personal things, my clothes, my books, my photo albums, those were coming with me. The hardest part was thinking about Emma, my beautiful granddaughter who crawled into my lap every evening for stories, who called me Gamma and drew me pictures that I hung on the refrigerator. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that Grandma is leaving? How do you make sure she knows it's not her fault, that she's the only thing making this decision difficult? I decided I'd explain it simply. Grandma found her own apartment, like when Emma would grow up and find her own place someday. I'd still see her, still be her grandmother, but I wouldn't live here anymore. I practiced the conversation in my head dozens of times, each version breaking my heart a little more. David and Ashley didn't notice the changes. They didn't notice that I'd stopped buying groceries for the week ahead, that I was only preparing meals day by day. They didn't notice that I'd moved some of my books to boxes in my closet, or that I'd quietly taken my grandmother's china to a storage unit I'd rented across town. They were too busy with their own lives to pay attention to mine, which made everything easier. On a Tuesday morning in late October, exactly 3 weeks after Ashley had called me the maid, I waited for them to leave for work. David kissed Emma goodbye and reminded me she had a play date after school. Ashley grabbed her coffee mug, the one I'd washed every morning for 3 years, and left without saying anything at all. Just another Tuesday where the maid would handle everything. Except this time, the maid was done. I called the moving company first. They'd be there at noon to pack and load my belongings. Then I called Emma's preschool to let them know that Daddy would be picking her up today instead of Grandma, and that I'd already spoken to him about it. That part was a lie, but it would all work out. I spent the morning packing my most precious items myself. The photo albums chronicling David's childhood, Emma's artwork from the refrigerator, the recipe box that had belonged to my mother. I wrapped each item carefully, as if I were handling pieces of my heart. The movers arrived precisely at noon, professional, efficient men who treated my belongings with respect. "Nice place," the lead mover commented, looking around the spacious living room. "You must really love this house." "I did," I said, "but it's time for something new." While they worked, I prepared 2 envelopes. The first contained my formal notice to David and Ashley that I was calling in the promissory note, along with copies of all relevant documentation. 30 days to arrange refinancing or repayment. Michael had drafted it in language that was firm but not cruel. The second envelope contained a letter I'd written and rewritten a dozen times. "David and Ashley, by the time you read this, I'll be settled in my new apartment. I've left the address and phone number below. The house keys are on the kitchen counter. I've also left a copy of the promissory note you signed 3 years ago when I contributed to this house purchase. My lawyer has advised me that I have the right to call in this loan, and I'm exercising that right. You have 30 days to arrange refinancing or repayment. I'm not doing this out of anger, though I won't pretend I'm not hurt by how I've been treated. I'm doing this because I finally remembered that I deserve to be valued as more than free help. I raised a good son who somehow forgot that his mother is a person worthy of respect. I hope you both figure out how to treat the people who love you with the dignity they deserve. Emma's emergency contact information is updated at school. I'll always be her grandmother and I'll always love her, but I won't be her free babysitter anymore. Good luck with the mortgage, Margaret." I sealed both envelopes and left them propped against the coffee maker, where they'd be impossible to miss. The last thing I packed was my armchair. The movers wrapped it carefully in blankets and loaded it into their truck. Watching it disappear into the darkness of the moving van, I felt a pang of loss. That chair had been my refuge in this house, the one place that felt entirely mine. But now I'd have a whole apartment that was entirely mine. I did one final walkthrough of the house, checking to make sure I hadn't forgotten anything important. In Emma's room, I left a wrapped present on her bed, a photo album I'd made for her, filled with pictures of us together, and a note explaining that Grandma loved her very much and would see her soon. In the master bedroom, I left David's childhood photo albums on the dresser. In the kitchen, I left all the cooking utensils and appliances I'd bought. They could figure out how to use them. The house felt different as I walked through it one last time. Emptier, even though most of the furniture was still there. It had never really been my home, I realized. It had been my prison, wrapped in the illusion of family togetherness. I climbed into my car and followed the moving truck to my new apartment. The entire drive, I kept expecting to feel sad or regretful or scared. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, excited about my future. My new apartment was perfect, bright, clean, and completely mine. The movers set up my armchair by the window overlooking the garden, and I sat down in it for the first time in my new space. The silence was different here. Not the oppressive quiet of being ignored, but the peaceful quiet of being alone by choice. I made myself a cup of tea and called my neighbor from my old house, Helen, who I'd stayed in touch with over the years. "Margaret," she said, delighted to hear from me. "How are things with the kids?" "Actually, Helen, I have some news. I just moved into my own place." "Oh my goodness, what happened?" I found myself laughing as I told her the story. Laughing. When had I last laughed about anything related to David and Ashley? "You know what, Helen? I think this is the best decision I've made in years." That evening, my phone rang. David's name on the caller ID. I looked at it for a long moment, then set the phone aside and let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. By the time I went to bed, I had 7 missed calls and 3 voicemails I didn't listen to. I slept better that night than I had in months. The calls continued for the next few days. David, Ashley, even Ashley's mother, Linda, called to talk sense into me. I listened to one voicemail from David. "Mom, what the hell is this legal notice? You can't just leave. Emma is asking where you are. We need to discuss this like adults." Like adults. As if I hadn't been trying to be treated like an adult for 3 years. I didn't return any of the calls. Michael had advised me that any communication should go through him during the 30-day notice period to keep things clean and legal. But more than that, I wasn't ready to hear their explanations or excuses or promises to do better. I'd heard those before. 2 weeks into my new life, I ran into my former neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, at the grocery store. "Margaret, I heard you moved out. David seemed so upset when I saw him. What happened?" I decided it was time for my own place again, I said simply. "But that beautiful house and little Emma, weren't you happy there?" I thought about how to answer that. Happy wasn't the right word. Useful, maybe. Needed for what I could provide, certainly. But happy. "Mrs. Patterson, have you ever been in a situation where you were essential but not valued?" She frowned, thinking, "I'm not sure I understand." "I hope you never do," I said with a smile. 3 weeks in, Ashley called from an unknown number, catching me off guard. I answered before I realized who it was. "Margaret, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "This is ridiculous. You can't just abandon your family over one comment." "I didn't abandon anyone, Ashley. I stopped accepting unacceptable treatment. I never called you a maid." "Yes, you did, in front of your parents, after I spent 3 days preparing a dinner you took credit for in a house I paid for." There was silence on the other end. Then, "Okay, maybe that came out wrong, but you know I didn't mean it that way. Come home, Margaret. Emma misses you." "Emma is welcome to visit me anytime. You have my address. But who's going to watch her after school? Who's going to cook dinner? We can't afford a babysitter and house payments." And there it was. The truth. They didn't miss me. They missed their free childcare and housekeeping service. They missed their live-in help. "I guess you'll figure it out," I said, and hung up. The 30-day notice period ended on a Thursday. That afternoon, Michael called to let me know that David and Ashley had managed to secure refinancing, barely qualifying with both their incomes and Ashley's parents as co-signers. The mortgage payment would be higher now, and they'd had to extend the term, but they could keep the house. "They're not happy," Michael said with what sounded like amusement in his voice. "Ashley's mother called me 3 times demanding to know if this was all legal. I assured her it was completely legal and entirely your right." "Good," I said. "I'm glad they found a solution." "Are you? You sound remarkably calm for someone who just forced her son to scramble for a mortgage." I considered that. Was I calm? Yes, I realized I was. "Michael, for 3 years, I felt like I was disappearing, like I was becoming smaller and less important every day. These past few weeks, I feel like myself again. Whatever they had to do to keep that house, they chose to do it. Those are adult decisions made by adult people." "Well, congratulations on your independence, Margaret. You should be proud of yourself." After I hung up, I sat in my armchair and thought about that word, proud. When was the last time I'd felt proud of myself? Proud of a meal I'd cooked, maybe, or proud of Emma when she learned something new. But proud of myself, of my choices, of my strength. It had been a very long time. That evening, as I was watering the small herb garden I'd started on my balcony, I heard a car door slam in the parking lot below. Looking down, I saw David getting out of his car, holding Emma's hand. My heart jumped. Emma was here. I met them at the front door of the building. Emma saw me through the glass and pressed her little hands against it, grinning. "Gamma, Daddy said you got your own house like a grown-up." "I did, sweetheart. Would you like to see it?" She nodded enthusiastically. David looked tired, older somehow. The stress of the past month had carved new lines around his eyes. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, David." Can we come up? Emma's been asking to see you every day." I led them upstairs to my apartment. Emma ran immediately to the window. "Look, Daddy, Gamma can see flowers from her house." She turned to me with serious 5-year-old eyes. "Are you happy in your new house, Gamma?" "Very happy, sweetheart." David looked around the apartment, taking in my armchair positioned perfectly by the window, my books arranged on new shelves, the small dining table set for one. "It's nice, Mom. Really nice." "Thank you." We stood there awkwardly while Emma explored, touching everything with gentle curiosity. Finally, David said, "I'm sorry about Ashley calling you what she called you, about all of it. I should have said something." "Yes, you should have." "I was wrong. We were wrong. We took you for granted and we treated you like—" He struggled with the words. "Like the help," I finished for him. "Yeah, like the help, and you're not the help. You're my mother. You're Emma's grandmother. You're family." I nodded. "I am family. But David, being family doesn't mean I have to accept being treated poorly. It doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my dignity to prove my love." Emma came running over with one of my photo albums. "Gamma, tell me about this picture." It was a photo of David at Emma's current age, sitting in my lap while I read him a story. "That's your daddy when he was little, just like you." "You took care of Daddy?" "I did, just like I take care of you when you visit me." "Can I visit you lots and lots?" "I hope so, sweetheart." David cleared his throat. "About that, we'd like you to come back. Things would be different this time. Ashley knows she was wrong." I looked at this man I'd raised, this father who was trying to do right by his daughter while managing his own marriage and financial stress. "David, I'm not coming back." "But, Mom—" "I'm not coming back," I repeated gently. "But that doesn't mean I'm gone from your lives. Emma can visit me any time. You can visit. We can have dinner here or go out together. We can be family without me being your unpaid staff." He was quiet for a long moment. "The house feels different without you. Empty." "I imagine it does. You'll figure it out." Ashley had to quit her book club and her yoga classes. She's picking up Emma from school now, doing the grocery shopping. She's not happy about it. "Adjustments are hard," I said neutrally. "She wants to hire a cleaning service, but we can't afford it with the new mortgage payment." I didn't respond to that. Their financial arrangements were no longer my concern. Emma tugged on my sleeve. "Gamma, can we make cookies?" "Not today, sweetheart, but next time you visit, we'll make cookies together." "Just me and you." "Just me and you." She beamed at that prospect. As they prepared to leave, David hugged me awkwardly. "I love you, Mom. I know I haven't shown it very well lately, but I do. I love you too, David. I always will. But I love myself too, and I won't go back to feeling invisible." After they left, I made myself dinner and sat by the window watching the sunset paint the garden below in golden light. My phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "How are you settling in?" I typed back, "Like I'm exactly where I belong." And for the first time in 3 years, that was completely true.